If you ever hear a Students for Life speaker like Kristen Hawkins quote us, it's most likely you heard them quote either DBW, don't be weird, or the idea of fetus tunnel vision. And both of those relate to this article and the next few that I'm going to read. Because it started off with this thing, so DBW wasn't even originally a thing that we said. I heard someone at Justice for All say that. I'm not even sure at this point who originally came up with the phrase "don't be weird," but certainly it is really connected to our ethos here. We want to help pro-life people to not be weird. I say that a lot in my talks. And so I remember a couple of years ago, I guess it probably would have been about 5 years ago now, a Students for Life staff person, I don't remember who, reached out to me asking for an example of a weird thing that pro-life people do. I think she might have been putting together a whole DVW speech or a section of her speech. And so the first thing that came to my mind was fetus tunnel vision. And this was something that I've been thinking about for years. When I used to host a different pro-life podcast called Life Report, there was an episode that we did. I had been planning on talking about this concept, although I didn't have the phrase. The phrase was something that Tim came up with as I was talking to him on the phone about it. But even before that conversation happened, I had been planning on us talking about this kind of common thing. This is less often now, but certainly in the first 10 years or so after 9/11, every time 9/11 came back around, I was seeing a lot of pro-life people on my Facebook newsfeed posting some kind of a meme or, just the idea of, how many more babies are aborted every day than died on 9/11. And so I'd had for, I think, years on the docket is that this was a thing I wanted to talk about on Life Report, is that this is maybe not a very good thing to do. And then right as we were getting ready to record that episode, it finally kind of rose up to the top of the priority list. A friend and colleague of mine that I'm not going to name just because I think at this point he and I agree a lot more now on this than we did at the time. But a friend and colleague of mine had posted a meme. This was the day of the Aurora movie theater massacre that basically compared that death toll with Planned Parenthood's daily death toll. So that was actually even a more obvious case of fetus tunnel vision and something that we should not do than even the 9/11 thing. And so I had a conversation with him, and then we did the Life Report discussion, and I tried to fairly represent both sides. But we did have that discussion, and he and I are still good friends, so we're fine. But anyway, this was a thing that I've been thinking about for a while, and I started blogging, so I thought I should go ahead and write a blog post on this. So while you could go back and watch that Life Report episode, I would say that this article and the following two in this series do a more systematic, kind of thorough job of explaining exactly what's wrong with fetus tunnel vision, both at a pragmatic and principled level. So this is the main piece. And one that has become something that I've seen, Students for Life and other groups linked to on a fairly regular basis. So a lot of people, you might have first found out about our blog through this piece. And so it's called Fetus Tunnel Vision, 4 Reasons Pro-Lifers Need to Stop Doing This. And I start the post with a trigger warning for those who have experienced sexual trauma. So if you're watching or listening and you've experienced sexual trauma, just know that topic comes up in this piece. We have a motto at Justice for All Trainings, DBW, don't be weird. We certainly don't believe that all pro-lifers act weirdly, but most of us have seen well-meaning pro-life people do things that appear odd at best to the world around us. If we want to make an impact on how people think, we should avoid being off-putting or weird when possible. One of my colleagues at Students for Life of America recently asked me for an example of pro-lifers doing things that appear weird to our society. And the first thing that came to mind was something that my brother Timothy and I call FTV, or fetus tunnel vision. Here's how we define fetus tunnel vision: the inability to see and or acknowledge human rights and justices without equating or comparing them to abortion. I'll give you a common example and then make 4 arguments that pro-lifers should avoid FTV. I'll never forget where I was on September 11, 2001. Unless you're pretty young, you remember that day too. Our nation watched in horror as dozens of people jumped from the burning towers, knowing they would die when they hit the ground. We watched in horror as 2 skyscrapers collapsed on themselves with thousands of people inside, while the news stations frequently cut over to shots of the Pentagon with a huge hole in the side and a crashed plane in Pennsylvania. Put simply, 9/11 is one of the most unforgettable acts of violence we've seen live on TV. Yet, every time September 11 rolls around, I watch dozens of well-meaning pro-life people post Facebook statuses like this. 2,977 people died on 9/11. 3,300 babies are killed every day in abortion facilities. Why does everyone get so upset about the former and not the latter? Number 1. You won't persuade a lot of people to become pro-life while comparing every single instance of multiple people dying to abortion. People won't take your moral views seriously if it seems like your moral compass is broken. They won't have a reason to believe your moral compass is properly functioning if you are unable to authentically acknowledge the horror of other mass killings. Pro-choice people look at the 9/11 Facebook status above and think, of course we get so upset about 2,977 people dying. And we should. It was horrific. And we watched it on the news. Why can't you see how horrible 9/11 is? Don't miss this point. I've almost never heard a pro-life person actually say that we shouldn't mourn those other tragedies. But what they say comes across to many people as devaluing one tragedy to elevate the one issue they care most about. I think some pro-life individuals just need help expressing the grief they already feel about other human rights violations. Number 2, other human rights injustices matter too. Just like some people need to finally realize how unjust abortion is, we need to be able to acknowledge the injustice of rape, human trafficking, and incidents of mass killings like 9/11. Sometimes the problem is that pro-lifers see the injustice of abortion just fine. What they often lack is a sufficient understanding of just how horrible atrocities like human trafficking are. In 2012, I spent several weeks researching the issue of sex slavery for a campus outreach designed to generate dialogue among the student body about apathy regarding social injustice. Through that experience, I realized that it's one thing to know sex slavery exists and it must be bad, but it's another thing to watch an interview of a survivor describing the hell of her experience. And in the piece, I linked to that interview. It's one thing to know women are probably enslaved in your city, but it's another thing to know that they are probably being held by kidnappers who are pocketing the money made, beating them into submission on a regular basis, threatening the lives of their family members to prevent them from escaping, and that they are sometimes raped 6 to 10 times a night. We need to be able to grieve and even weep over human rights injustices that are going on right around us, including those injustices that are not abortion, because the victims of rape, sex slavery, and events like 9/11 are people too. We effectively dehumanize these people if we ignore these things, or upon hearing them, we immediately do an abortion juke. Number 3. Comparing every instance of mass killing to abortion is rude. Imagine what it would be like to have lost a husband on September 11. Every time the anniversary comes around when the nation should be commemorating your husband's death, you see people comparing it to the social issue they most care about. It's just wrong. Thousands of people died, and we need to appropriately observe that fact without constantly attempting to turn the focus to abortion. And number 4, thoughtful pro-choice people will see that you're begging the question. One of the central issues of the abortion debate is whether or not the unborn have the same value as born human beings like those who died on 9/11. If you're talking to a solely pro-life audience whom already believes the premise that the unborn are valuable human beings, you're not begging the question. However, if you're talking to a mixed audience and you want pro-choice people to reconsider the issue of abortion, this isn't going to do the trick. For your statement to make any sense, you must be assuming that the unborn are valuable human beings, precisely the thing you should be trying to demonstrate with reasonable arguments. Somebody could respond, but Josh, I don't have pro-choice Facebook friends, so when I post a comparison to abortion on 9/11, I'm not trying to persuade pro-choice people of anything. I'm just trying to help my apathetic friends to see the horror of abortion. My concern is that when we talk to each other, we set habits that affect the way people think about things. I don't want to train pro-life people to hear about a big tragedy and immediately think, that's not as bad as abortion. I want pro-life people to have a proper amount of grief about all human rights injustices. Does that mean we need to split our time fighting every human rights injustice? No, that wouldn't be very effective. We need people focusing on abortion. We also need people focusing on ending sex slavery. Those are two different issues with different causes and necessary responses. What I'm arguing here is that we need to be able to see how horrible non-abortion injustices are and respond appropriately. Doing this publicly will also have a side benefit of helping pro-choice people see that we're normal human beings who oppose injustice. Then we can gain the opportunity to show abortion to be the injustice it is.